Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker and I prepared to rock out the Central Division, part one of our season previews. We just finished with the Pacific Division. If you haven't heard that one, go back, check it out. There's part one and part two. We'll give our predictions for that division, and we are going to do the same for the Central. Part one, we're going to hit the Arizona Coyotes, Colorado Avalanche, Minnesota Wild, and the St. Louis... Nope. Just totally messed that up. Skipped the whole team. Arizona Coyotes, Chicago Blackhawks, Colorado Avalanche, and the Dallas Stars. We'll just alphabetical order it. So those will be the four teams on this one. And part two, you'll find the Minnesota Wild, Nashville Predators, St. Louis Blues, and the Winnipeg Jets. With that said, Justin, hi.
Oh, hi. Nice to see you again.
Yeah. Good to talk to you. Can't see you. Haven't seen you in a long time. You know, for all I know, you now weigh 345 pounds, and you're doing this show from the old refrigerator box from the house that you sold. Although the audio quality is probably too good for that. But
maybe.
Okay, the Central Division. Before we dive into the four teams we're going to hit today, what are kind of what's your feel for the Central? Like the Pacific, it was very like, yeah, there's two really good teams here, and then the rest of it's kind of a crapshoot, and there's a lot of really bad teams, so anything can happen. The Central, what's your vibe coming in?
I think there's a lot of wild cards here in this team. I look at a team like Chicago, for example. They made a lot of moves. Duncan Keith is gone. Seth Jones is in. Again, there could be some big changes to this team. They could really make a push. Same with, again, we had the Dallas Stars, maybe not as effective as we thought they could be last year. Nashville making some moves. There's just so much going on in this division. I think, honestly, you could roll the dice with every team outside of Colorado and maybe see where they land.
Yeah, and to be honest, even Colorado took a good hit. Like, Colorado is, we'll get to Colorado, but there is a world where Colorado doesn't finish number one in this division.
Sure, yeah.
I think this division, you're right, it's wide open. Let's start with the Arizona Coyotes, mostly because I think that they did the most. Like, nobody sent out more players, nobody brought in more players in the Central Division than the Arizona Coyotes. They made some moves. They're no longer the same team that they were last season. In a nutshell, we'll talk about players that left. Darcy Kemper goes to Colorado. Antti Ranta goes to went to New York, right?
No,
he didn't. Where did he go? I'm blanking.
Yeah.
You wouldn't go to New York. That's weird. That just
no. He went to Carolina. I'm sorry.
That's right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Him and James Reimer.
James Reimer did not go to Carolina. That's a lie.
I'm sorry. He left Carolina. He went to San Jose. Sorry. I'm sorry.
We're just gonna stop doing the show because we don't know anything about hockey. No, there's so many damn people going places. There was like more people moving teams this last off season than ever before. So you can't blame us. Get mad at us, call us idiots on Twitter. That would be fun. Aiden Hill, their other goalie, goes to San Jose. So basically, this team is left with no goaltender. And they also lose Christian Dvorak, traded to Montreal, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, and Connor Garland to Vancouver. And Alex Goligoski heads to Minnesota. So practically everybody leaves. And the names coming in are not anyone that's going to make you super pumped about the next year. Ryan Dzingel, Carter Hutton, new starting goalie, Carter Hutton, Dmitry Askin, Connor Timmins, Anton Strawman, Antoine Roussel, Jay Beagle, Louis Erickson, Shane Gostisbehere, Joseph Coronar, Travis Boyd, and Andrew Ladd from the New York Islanders.
Oh.
I think the number one question heading into this year is who will be next?
Look, if you look at their forward group, right, they've only got 3 guys signed beyond this season. It's ridiculous. Andrew Ladd, okay, well, he's pretty much done, so you might as well just throw him on IR, so he doesn't count anymore.
Right.
So, yeah, they've got Clayton Keller and Nick Schmaltz. Really, that's it beyond this season. And those guys, luckily for them, are 23 and 25 years of age, so they can still be part of a rebuild. They can still be guys that can, hang around for a few more years. God knows how long the rebuild's going to take, but luckily for this team, they've got 3 first-rounders and 5 second-rounders, so they can rebuild pretty dang quick. And then not to mention guys that they can unload at the deadline for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny because the 2 guys that are signed beyond this next year are maybe the most likely players to go. Like Nick Schmaltz, he very well could get dealt. No doubt about it. Clayton Keller, he'd be a tough one to move, I think, because of how much he's getting paid. But it wouldn't surprise me if he's not an Arizona Coyote for that much longer. But I don't know he gets dealt this during the season. But Phil Kessel, man, I got to think that he's going to be out of there unless he's dying to stay. It won't take long. I mean, he gets to submit an 8-team trade list. Unless he's just dying to stay there and lose. Thinking like, well, I won some cups. I'm all set. I do foresee sometime in this next year where the rumor mill begins, and the rumor mill of Phil Kessel back to Toronto starts.
Oh boy!
I truly believe you're gonna see it somewhere. There's enough that they could probably maneuver their way around and fit him if Arizona ate half the contract, but I don't know how willing they are going to be to do that. But that would be kind of fun. Phil Kessel comes back to Toronto and tries to win a cup with the new group that he just didn't have to stick around for all the absolutely horrific losing that they would go on to do. Yeah, I mean, really anyone from this team, I don't think anyone's safe. Even Jacob Chikrin, I think he could be the next one moved. This team is going to look to move a lot of players. They're stripping down. They want to start over, and often those pretty young players under cost control, those are the ones you're going to get a boatload for. And boy, would you get a boatload for Jacob Chikrin right now. So, I mean, I guess maybe here's instead of who's going to get dealt, let's go over under the amount of draft picks that they will have at the 2022 draft. Now, right now they have 12. Do we say an over under of 16.5?
Wow, okay.
What do you think?
I'll go under. I think they only end up maybe with an additional 3, and I say that because it wouldn't surprise me if they try to package a player and maybe a 3rd or 2nd round pick to get another 1st. Again, depending on how desperate a team is at the deadline to acquire somebody, maybe like a Jay Beagle or Antoine Roussel, a guy who can still, chip in every now and again and is a good depth player like a Ryan DeZingle. But maybe even further down the line, I think, you're going to see some lower draft picks, like another 5th or 6th round, get in there for one of these players. But Phil Kessel is the guy to me who could potentially net them the biggest return, because I think if you're willing to eat just a couple $1 million of a salary, there are a lot of teams that'll line up and give you a 1st or even, a couple 2nd round picks to bring this guy in and really solidify, a 2nd line spot for a guy who could still produce, in my opinion, and still can skate.
Okay. I'm going with over. I think they're going to have maybe. Now, I would think that some of it they'll try and get it towards the next year too. Package and try to get some picks in 2023 and 2024. But I'm going over 16.5 for that year. I think that they're looking at the top of that draft and hoping that they can probably hit on a few of those. My last thought, $1.5 million to go towards goaltending. I was doing my darndest to figure out the last time a team had $1.5 million towards their goaltending. And it's probably been I mean, you got to be talking somewhere in the early 90s when, the league max was like 300,000. That of 1.5 million to your goaltending in total is unbelievable. I just wanted to point that out. But let's move on to the Chicago Blackhawks. The Blackhawks add Tyler Johnson, Marc-Andre Fleury, Seth Jones, his brother Caleb, and Juki Harju. I feel like I said that right? Who knows? Jujahr.
No, you're good enough. We'll go with that.
No. You tell me, what is it?
Yukahari.
Okay, there we go. They lose Nikita Zadorov, Brent Seabrook, Adam Boqvist, and Duncan Keith. Adam Boqvist, of course, the key component of the Seth Jones deal. This Blackhawks team is apparently going for it. Last season, both Kane and Taves were pissed at the direction that the Blackhawks took, and kind of letting players go and coming into the season with lesser goaltending, we'll say. How much will Marc-Andre Fleury and Seth Jones elevate this Blackhawks team in the standings? Like, they're obviously trying to make a push. Is this a push to get into the playoffs? Is this a push because they think that these players will help them to win a Stanley Cup? Like, where are we at with this Blackhawks team?
Yeah, let's be honest here, too. They've got a team now, not only that is got a number one goaltender and a number one defender, but they've also got their number one center back, right? A lot of teams don't have that luxury of getting one, if not all three of those positions basically filled for a whole new season. So you bring in Jonathan Taves back off that injured-riddled season last year. So he's healthy. He's ready to go from what I understand.
I thought I saw that he might not start the year.
If that's the case, then yeah.
It was some kind of, it was like chronic immune response syndrome or something, right? Like,
okay,
that was what was reported that he had,
right?
But yeah, maybe it is now coming out that he's going to play. The last I saw was that he might not start the year, and they were hoping that he would not miss too much of the start. But maybe that's changed.
Regardless, I think obviously you're getting a major upgrade over a guy like Subban for a Marc-Andre Fleury here in that. So you've got a guy who can basically, obviously, Vezina winner last year. So you got a guy who can backstop a team. You upgrade the defense in my mind. You go from having a number 5, number 6 defenseman to bringing in a number 1 in Seth Jones, who had a little bit of a down year last year, but I still think he is more than capable of producing. And now you've got him on a team that has some firepower up front. Obviously he didn't have that in Columbus. He had Cam Atkinson, and maybe that was it. Now he's got probably the greatest American player of all time, Patty Kane, to pass the puck to on the power play. You've got Alex DeBrincat, who is an emerging, I wouldn't say emerging. He's already emerged, but, he's definitely a top 6 winger. And, again, they've got Kirby Dach, who hopefully can potentially be that eventual number 1 center for this team. Maybe he fills in if Taves doesn't come back right away, maybe he can fill in there at that number 1 spot. But yeah, more weapons than he's had in a long time in Columbus. And so I think he's more than capable of getting back to his former Norris-esque self.
Okay. I love it. I think I have a really hard time not rooting for this team, right? Like they went for it, and I love it. I love that they just went for it. I hope that, Tyler Johnson is given opportunities to succeed here. I think that he very well could, find himself playing alongside Patrick Kane. I think there's a chance of it. Maybe it's Kirby Dach, but I think there's a chance. Maybe he gets that opportunity to move up in the lineup and make a big impact. So it would be fun to see Tyler Johnson doing well again. Not being the 4th line center. Always appreciated who he was and how he played the game. Marc-Andre Fleury. Is he going to win the Vezina a second year in a row? What do you think?
Maybe not. I think, again, he had the ability to get some rest. I think last year with Leonard back there to to relieve him in those stretches where maybe he was playing a lot of back-to-backs.
Yeah, but Lankinen was great.
I mean, he was good. He wasn't great. Is he Robin Leonard? No, not at all. So
no, sure. But I mean, he played 37 games. I mean, that's probably too many for Lankinen. I mean, if you've got him down in like 25 games and Marc-Andre Fleury's posting up, 55 games in the season, I think that you're in a pretty good shape for both of those goalies to be able to be at their best.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with you there. I think that's an ideal situation for both these guys. But again, I mean, at 36 years old, Marc-Andre Fleury has basically won everything now. He's got the Vezina, but I still think he wants to go out and prove that he's still capable. I think he might feel a little slighted by the way he was kind of exited from Vegas.
You think he might feel a little slighted?
Yeah,
mildly slighted.
So maybe he's got that chip and he plays at a whole nother level we just didn't see in Vegas before. And yeah, I mean, it's a realistic possibility because I do think this is a team that's going to compete in the Central. Obviously, he's going to have a lot more tough teams than he did when he was playing in Vegas. I think the competition in this division is a lot stronger. So maybe it's just going to be harder for him to get as many wins and post some incredible numbers like he's done. But I still think he's a top tier number one goaltender.
It's funny that that last year was his best year of his entire career. in terms of his numbers. I mean, almost by far. Like, he did have his first year in Vegas, a .927 save percentage. This year was .928, but that .198 goals against is also ridiculous, which tends to be more of a team number. But yeah, I mean, who has their best? Like, what Hall of Fame player? Because he's in the Hall of Fame. Like, he's going to be first ballot Hall of Famer. What Hall of Fame player has their best year as a 36-year-old? That just doesn't really happen. Like, usually when you're at that level, for that long in your career, your best years are somewhere in your 20s. Like, yeah, you have good years in your 30s, but for your best year to be when you're 36 years old is unbelievable at this level of play. Like, this isn't a guy who's been really good since he was 28, and now at 36 he had like a really crazy year. Like, this guy's been in the NHL since he was like his first year, 03-04. He was drafted in 2002, 3. Oh, he played as an 18-year-old, right? So
yeah.
I mean, that's just unbelievable to have in your 18th season in the NHL, you go and you have your best year. That's madness. I wonder if it's ever happened before.
Yes, it has. I immediately thought of this name and took a look. But what I will say, the difference is this guy came into the league later in his life. So when you look at a guy who had his best year at 36.
Okay, are we talking about Tim Thomas? Yeah. Yeah. But see, he wasn't a mainstay until he was much older anyways.
Right. So he was 31.
So you think like the wear and tear in his body's maybe a little less.
Absolutely.
That would be, some of the thought. But for a guy, that's what, like Tim Thomas, really great years, not a Hall of Fame goalie. Marc-Andre Fleury, first ballot Hall of Famer. Like, this guy has always been very, very, very good. Like, even in his worst years, he was still pretty darn good. And really, his worst years came in years where, like, the Penguins weren't good anyways. Right. So you almost have to just kind of like, he was just kind of warming up. and for the way, I mean, he is, it's funny because he's definitely not, like, he's not looked upon the same way that people looked at Martin Brodeur or Patrick Waugh, Dominic Hasek, Ed Belfour even. But he's just as good as almost all those guys. Like, in terms of his numbers and what he's been able to do, the cups that he's won, I mean, he is on Patrick Waugh's level in terms of the era that he plays in. He's on the same level, but he will never get the same kind of love that Patrick Waugh got. Never.
No.
Despite being, again, a first ballot Hall of Famer. Maybe that's just personality or I don't know, but And because he played for such good teams.
Yeah, what I will say, yes, it was personality, but with Marc-Andre Fleury, he was never the best guy on the team, right? When Brodeur was always the best guy on his team. Patrick Waugh, yeah, he was the best guy on his team.
Niedermeyer was also a Hall of Famer, and so was Scott Stevens.
Well, I'll give you that too, but yes, it was always Brodeur.
Crosby took the limelight, and Malkin took the limelight. Yeah, you got two other Hall of Famers, but all those other goalies played with Hall of Famers. Like Patrick Waugh played with Joe Sakic, when he was in Colorado. He played with some pretty great players in Montreal too when he was there. So you don't just get away with playing, but he didn't play with Gretzky, I guess is maybe what you're saying. He didn't play with Mario Lemieux, the other best players of that era. But anyways, okay, let's move on here from the Blackhawks and let's go to the Colorado Avalanche. They lose Philip Grubauer, add Darcy Kemper. They lose Donskoy, Brandon Saad, Ryan Graves, and Connor Timmins, and they substitute those guys in with Ryan Murray and Darren Helm. So let's start it off. The first big question, the goaltending. I mean, they lose a Vezina Trophy candidate, and they bring in a guy who's been pretty good. But he kind of has kind of come into his own the last couple years. He's only played more than 30 games one time since 14-15. He played 55 games in 18-19, and pretty darn good goalie playing on a really bad team. Does this translate?
Yeah, that's the question mark, right? Because those Minnesota teams were mediocre at best. When he went to LA, they weren't any good there. And when he went to Arizona, they weren't any good there either, right? So they were competitive, but again, they weren't playoff teams. They weren't expected to go to the Stanley Cup. None of these teams were expected to be, Stanley Cup contenders. And so now he's in a whole new situation, right? He's got a team in front of him that can actually score a ton of goals if needed. So, yeah, I think there's maybe a little less pressure to be really good in net as there maybe was in Arizona, because he was basically the only way they were going to win games.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Yes.
But what I will say on the flip side of that, he's in a contract year, right? So that might play in his favor, because we always seem to, see players do very, very well in contract years and then tank the first year of their new contract. But, I mean, it's going to be interesting because this team basically passed, like you said, on a Vezina caliber goaltender for, a mere $500,000, it seems like, in terms of, money. And so, yeah, they bring in Darcy Kemper, which I think he's a very capable starting goaltender, but, he's not a guy who, again, has played a heavy workload. Pavel Francouz, I don't really think he's anything more than just a backup, not even a 1B in my opinion. So, anything more than 25 games, I'm a little worried for him.
I mean, he played 34 last year, and he looked pretty darn good. It just was once the playoff came. Like, in my mind, Francouz, he can play probably that 30 plus if you need him to, which is essentially a 1B, right? Like, if you're playing more than 30 games, you're a 1B.
If you are, yes.
It's just disconcerting if he needs to be the one playing in the playoffs. Like, that's what killed Colorado. In his 6 games, he just was not good. And
I mean, obviously Kemper's going to be the guy in those playoffs, right?
But I mean, barring injury, that's where that who you have behind does play a big role. So yeah, I mean, goaltending, it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. I think Kemper will do fine, but based on the way that Colorado's kind of structured their salary, they don't have much of a choice but not to pay their goaltenders very much money, because of course they go. Probably their biggest splash was re-signing Gabriel Landeskog to that big $7 million a year deal. And they're, basically for the next 2 years, they're pretty set. Like, they're in a pretty good spot for the next 2 years as far as paying for really expensive players. I know Nazem Kadri's a UFA. He's one of my questions for this team. Like, if Kadri can kind of bounce back here, I mean, once again suspended in the playoffs. He had a mediocre regular season as well. 11 goals in 56 games, not very good. He only plays the 2 games in the playoffs. Actually, the year before, in 1920 in the bubble, he had a fantastic playoffs. He had 18 points in 15 games, 9 goals. He was really, really good in those playoffs. That's really good. That's going to be the question mark for Kadri is, along with the Avalanche, is how far can they make it in the playoffs? Like, at this point, you look at this team and you go, well, let's see. You guys got to win. You only have 2 more years of Nathan MacKinnon at $6.3 million, and after that, you're not going to be as good as everyone else. You're just not. Like, you're not going to be the team you are right now because you're not going to be able to afford to be.
Yeah, they're basically going to have to draft well and bring in young guys that they can play like Chicago did for all those years, where they were able to get those third and second line guys for, league minimums because they drafted so well.
Well, and so that's what you're hoping out of like Bowen Byram, but his contract's up the same year that McKinnon's is up. So if he goes out and he's really as good as he's been touted to be, then you're got to sign another player for $6+ million a year. And yes, Eric Johnson's deal does come off the books at that point as well. But there's going to be a lot of moving parts for this team, and you're basically in this situation where, and you look at what is going to come, you need to win now because this is going to get broken apart. Whether you are like the Tampa Bay Lightning and you're able to like keep the group together for an extra year, eventually it's like you're going to have to lose pieces like you watch the Lightning have to do over the summer. They lost an entire line, maybe the most important line in the playoffs. They lose the whole thing because they just couldn't afford to keep them. And they'll figure out a way, I'm sure, to piece it back together, but they're just not going to be as good because they have to keep paying their top players.
Yeah, that is going to be a problem. And so you look for guys. To me, I'm looking down at a guy like Tyson Jost to take that next step, right? Because again, Kadri, if he goes out and he has another fantastic run in the playoffs, if he doesn't get suspended, he'll walk and he'll get paid a little bit more money by somebody else who desperately needs a top 6 center. And so you expect a guy like Tyson Jost to step up a little bit.
I just don't know. I don't know where the Tyson Jost stuff comes from.
Well, I don't either. I absolutely agree with you. I'm not a huge fan of
7 goals, 8 goals, 11 goals, 12 goals. Like, he's never scored more than 12 goals, and 12 goals was his rookie season.
No, I agree. I don't think he's made out to be this top 6 guy like I think a lot of people expected him to be. But again, if you're Colorado, you need those guys to step up and be those guys who can fill in those spots, because eventually, like you said, McKinnon's going to need money, and it's going to hurt them, and they're not going to be able to sign guys to fill in those middle 6 roles like other teams maybe can.
Sure. Yep. Certainly, with the loss of Donskoy and Saad, they're going to need scoring lower in the lineup, and you're looking to Nichushkin. Can he continue to score? And he scored 10 goals last year, 13 the year before. Maybe in a full season, he's a 20-goal scorer. That's going to be really important. Like, he needs to keep that up. This team, from a forward standpoint, is in a very similar situation to Edmonton, right? Like, desperate to find scoring anywhere that you can. And I'd say I like Edmonton's forward group better than Colorado's at this point.
Wow.
So now, hey, because what? We're going Nathan MacKinnon, Connor McDavid. Who am I taking? McDavid. Then what are we saying? Rantanen and Draisaitl. I'm taking Draisaitl. Maybe, and that's where, they have the edge with Landeskog. I don't think that you're taking Landeskog over Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. But beyond that, who do I want, Kadri or Hyman? I'll take Hyman all day. Do you want Burakovsky or like a Warren Fogle?
I'll take Burakovsky at that point.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not like they're that far off, but it's definitely much closer than I think some people would have you believe. Like, the way they talk about Colorado's forward group, unbelievable. It's probably more driven from the back end with Cale Makar, Samuel Girard, Devin Taves, and what they hope Bowen Byram to be. That back end stirs the drink a lot more than maybe we expect.
Yeah, and then let's not forget, too, I mean, that production they got from maybe some of those forwards, Kadri and Burakovsky, where maybe, you look at an Edmonton Oilers team and you say, okay, now they can compete with that from a forward group standpoint. After this year, that's out the window because they're not going to be able to re-sign those guys if they have, years like they did last year. They're going to want more money.
Right.
So
that's the downside when you have really good years. Everybody wants money.
Right.
Even when they don't have good years, they want money. Damn it. Everybody wants their money. I get it. So I would want my money too. Speaking of which, you can go to givemarkpaulmoney.com. Donations start at $1,000 a month. It's a good subscription.
I love it.
I'll text you once a month. That's it. That's all you get, but it's worth its weight in gold. I wonder if that website's real. It's not. Okay, let's go on to the Dallas Stars, our last team of Part 1 of the Central Division. This Dallas Stars team had a lot of injuries last year. Seguin, Hintz, Radulov. What are you going to do when those guys go down? They almost found their way into the playoffs. They just couldn't bring it all together. They couldn't seem to win that game in the end, like where it was like, oh, they just need to win this one and then they'll be in a great position, and they just wouldn't win it. Seguin came back probably a little bit too late. Everyone appears to be healthy. The question will be, outside of Ben Bishop, of course, but they've got, every goalie, Anton Khudobin, Braden Holtby, also Jake Ottinger, who played pretty well for them when called upon, their future goalie, or goalie of the future. Can this team stay healthy? That's, to me, the biggest question mark. Like, they've got to be doing something where guys seem to constantly be getting hurt. Can they stay healthy?
Yeah, that's the big question mark, right? And I think for me, the other big question mark is, can you still get the same kind of production that you got last year out of some of these guys? Because I think looking at some of these players, like a Rupe Hintz, a Joe Pavelski, maybe these guys played a little bit better than I expected them to play. Especially Joe Pa. I was not expecting him to pop over 25 goals and put up 51 points and lead this team in basically every area.
Well, it's because there was nobody else to do it. I mean, he got a lot of opportunity.
Absolutely. So now that everybody's healthy, are you going to get some decent production out of him? Because now that his minutes are going to be limited a little bit more. He played 19 minutes last year, which is, those are top line minutes.
It's probably too many minutes. It's too many minutes for him, and his production was actually harmed because of playing too much, like being put into too many situations. So then you're not in the best position to always go out and score. You're having to hold back a little bit. And for whatever reason, I know he's 37. I just don't have much worry about Joe Pavelski. He always seems to be able to answer the bell. I know 2 years ago, during the shortened season, he only had 31 points in 67 games, basically a 40-point season. I'm not expecting a point per game, out of him. I think that you're somewhere in the 45 to 50 point range for him over the course of an 82 game season, and that would be a great year for him. I don't think you'd have any problem with a 50 point. Maybe it's $7 million. It's a lot, or not enough. But the Stars also keep the puck out of their net really well. So as long as Seguin's healthy and if Ben can find the back of the net more often, Radulov stays healthy. Like, if this team can score and it doesn't have to be all Pavelski, I'm not worried. So
yeah, and you talk about keeping the puck out of the net too. I think when you look at it from a defensive standpoint, right, they keep their back end healthy. They bring in a guy like Ryan Suter, who now rounds out their top four. Really, really nice, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to trade Oleksiak for Ryan Suter on my decor.
Absolutely. So when you've got Esa Lindell and Klingberg, as that top line, and then you got Ryan Suter and Miro Heiskanen. I don't know how they want to pair this, but either way, I'm happy with any combination of those guys up front. Not to mention, you've got, on your bottom six now, you bring in a guy who I know very well. Luke Glendening is a fantastic two-way forward who is one of the best face-off guys in the league, kills penalties very, very good. And so now you have that added dimension on your team, on your bottom six role. I don't know where he'll plug in, either I'm assuming a fourth line center at this point. But again, you have options, right? So now with a healthy Sagan, this is going to be a very interesting team this year. And so the only guy I feel bad for, honestly, on this team right now is Jake Ottinger. Kind of sucks. He looks like he would have been worth a look as far as, a backup position, but they bring in Holtby. Who knows what's going to happen with that situation. So
I think they probably told him, we want you to get a full year in the AHL. We want, go dominate. And that's my guess. As much as you don't necessarily want that as a player, I think that he may get an opportunity. The way that these goalies for the Dallas Stars go down, you just never know.
He'll get some games, but I mean, he is in a contract year too, and I think maybe from a Dallas standpoint, if he's playing the whole year in the AHL, maybe gets 10 games, 5 games up here. You don't have to give him as much money if he came up and dominated right in the NHL level. So
that's true. For Dallas, it's building, I think, upon what you were able to do last year because of the injuries, like Dennis Gurianov, 30 points in 55 games, kind of played really, really well. Jason Robertson could have been Rookie of the Year in a lot of other years where Kirill Kaprizov isn't in it. 45 points, 17 goals. I mean, he's maybe a 30-goal scorer in a full season. Not to mention with Sagan back the whole entire year, what can he do? I really like this team. Last year I think was kind of fluky. They go to the Stanley Cup Finals, then you miss completely the next year. I think they were maybe a team affected the most by COVID because remember they got the big hit in the beginning of the year. They couldn't even start the season on time, and no one could stay healthy. It was just a bad personal year. It wasn't necessarily that their team was built bad. It just nothing worked and nothing went well for them. And I think that they've set themselves up and not panicked. And they, bring in Ryan Suter. I think he can still go out and play 25 minutes a night and be incredible for you. I look at this. I really like what they were able to do. Bringing in Glenn Denning is a nice piece as well. Of course, losing Jason Dickinson hurts, but he's a third line center. You can figure that out with a healthy Sagan. You're much less worried, and this team chugs out two-way forwards like it's nobody's business anyway. So I don't think that they're as worried about losing Dickinson. So. One other question. Will Ty Dellandrea become a full-time Dallas Star? That's a huge boost to what this team could do because, last year, he came up, played 26 games. He had 5 points, but 13th overall pick, 21 years old. If he can make the team and actually play some significant minutes, maybe that's somebody who can help you fill in your top 9 on the wing there. And it's always nice when you have one of your first round picks come up and make the team. I think he's probably the most likely guy that is on their non-roster right now to actually make the NHL squad. I think that he could fit nicely with this team as he did towards the end of the year last year.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love it. This team is going to be definitely a wild card for me. I think there's so many interesting pieces on this team that, again, Sagan, Ben, Suter, there's just so many variables that I think this team is definitely going to surprise people.
Yeah, the other thing is, if this just doesn't go well again, you can trade Joe Pavelski.
Yep.
He gets to submit a 3-team trade list, so you're not going to have many options. You could trade Radulov. He's a free agent at the end of the year too. Michael Raffle, Blake Como, and John Klingberg. If these guys don't want to come back, you certainly want to get something for them. My guess is that not all 3 of them come back. So, and not to mention Braden Holtby. So there are some pieces that they could move at the deadline as well if they are in a bad spot, which I don't expect them to be in a position where they're going, we need to sell the farm, get rid of everyone.
Right.
So, okay, well, there's the first 4 teams of the Central Division preview. Stay tuned for part 2. Look out for that, and you'll find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. We will talk to you guys soon. Justin, have yourself a great evening.
You as well, Mark.